Saturday, 8:39 a.m. I enter B&L dressed in blue chinos, a lemon shirt and a wide tie from my real estate days. Alan Brand is waiting for me. He's a large, untidy man who looks as though he's been roughly wrapped by a new shop assistant. His suit is like a fence that borders a national park. Take it away and Bush would reclaim him within weeks. We shake hands and he points to his office. Without so much as a hello or would you like a drink, he fixes on me with a set of eyes so close together they look like he's wearing a visor. He asked me accusingly, "How do you know Mr. Gumley then?" "He's my neighbour," I splutter, trying to stay calm. Just when I'm convinced that Mr. Brand is in on the whole mustard gas episode, he smiles at me and it alters my appraisal of him, slightly. "I've got some promotions work. Interested?" I say yes, adding, "I've done some real estate so I know promotions." He instantly gets on the phone. "Gary, I've got—" "Sandy," I say. "Sandy with me. 5'10", very big. I bet they're talking about my nose. "Start now?" I nod. "Yep," Mr. Brand says, then he hangs up. 3 hours every Saturday morning, 9 to 12, $8 an hour? I nod. "See Gary in the demountable round the back and he'll get you started." Mr. Brand thrusts out his hand. We shake and suddenly I'm employed. I walk to the rear of B&L and knock on Gary, the promotion manager's door. The back of B&L is different from the front. The front is brightly coloured with smiling salesfolk scattered about. Round the back it's greasy and smelly. Gary is about 2 years older than me. My height, jet black hair, thick 5 o'clock shadow, stocky frame. "You're Sandy," I say. "You're doing the promotions job?" "Whatever that is," I say. "Mr. Brand didn't say anything?" "No." "Ah, bring a change of clothes?" says Gary. "No," I say. "It can get very hot wearing this." Gary produces a yellow and black animal suit. "Meet Terry the Tiger," he says, confirming that it is in fact a tiger suit he's dangling in front of me. It's a one-piece, but there's a hole at the front and the back, so you don't have to take it off to go to the toilet. Time is money in the car business. You get the feeling that's a standard joke he uses on all the new Terrys. So all you do, Sandy, is walk around the yard, give out pamphlets, wave to kiddies, cars, that sort of thing. 10 minutes off every hour. In the breaks, I suggest you take in a lot of liquid, mate. 9:04 a.m. It's nice inside Terry the Tiger. The soft fur inside the suit feels rather pleasant on my adductors. Unfortunately, to see out of the suit, you have to look through the nostrils on the oversized head, which means you need to tilt your head back. After 10 minutes, my neck is already stiff. To make matters worse, Gary gives me a heavy bag of pamphlets to distribute. I'm going to be a sore boy tomorrow. As I enter the car yard to start work dressed in the tiger suit, I suddenly realise what Gary meant by "it can get hot inside the suit." It's so bloody humid inside Terry, I could grow tomatoes. I'm tentative to begin with, but I soon find immense freedom knowing that my face is hidden. I quickly start doing huge body movements, being provocative with young couples and rude to pensioners. Oh, I wish I could wear this suit out on Friday nights. I also try to stand as near to the other employees as often as I can, so if there is information about Mr. Gumley, or the plane, or the mustard gas, I'll pick it up. 11:55 a.m. A group of surfers pull up in a Cortina. If I wasn't inside the tiger suit, I wouldn't have gone over. After I hand them a pamphlet, the guy in the passenger seat grabs my arm and says, "Don't worry, Mr. Tiger, We'll release you back into the wild, at which point the driver takes off with me still attached. I'm sure it's funny seeing a promotional tiger running next to a Cortina, but it was frightening inside the suit. Luckily, I broke free just before the expressway because there's a 100k speed limit there. Being uninhibited is exhilarating. Oh, but gee, it's frustrating and dangerous. 12:24 p.m. At the end of my shift, the $24 cash eases the pain, and Mr. Brand's faint praise lifts me. Mr. Brand also provides me with 2 snippets of information on the Gumley case. Firstly, he says, "I'll give Barton a ring and tell him you went well." "Barton?" I say. "Barton Gumley, my partner." "Mr. Gumley's in the car business." "Barton's got his fingers in lots of pies." "Engineering?" I add, mindful of why I'm here. I wouldn't know about that. End of conversation. Alan Brand certainly gave me a weird look when I inferred Mr. Gumley was involved in engineering. Maybe I should be more circumspect with my questions. These thoughts crisscross my mind as I drive home with an anchovy pizza on the passenger seat beside me, inhaling its perfume, stiff and sore from my morning wearing a promotional tiger suit. I envisage making it home with my pizza untouched, but, curiosity gets the better of me and I open the box, forgetting, of course, that once you open a pizza box, it can never be closed again. That's why they call a pizza box the drunk man's Rubik's Cube. 1:15 p.m. As I pull into Pleasant Avenue, something is different. I've seen this view so many times before, the same cars parked in the same spots, the same people hosing the same cement. Sometimes, when you see the same things over and over, you don't recognize something when it's different, but something is different today. There's an ambulance in the street. It's hard to tell which house it's parked at because there's a ring of Pleasant Avenuers gathered around it. I see the Melvies, Mr. Price, Coral, Nev, but not my parents. Oh no, please don't let it be my parents. My heart pumps double time as I drive towards the ambulance parked between my place and the Charcos. I still can't see my parents. I frantically swing the car around and pull up in front of Mr. Price's. It's odd parking in a different spot at the best of times, but on this occasion I have real trouble. I could have got closer to the gutter, but I do my best in the circumstances. I jump out of the car and head towards the crowd. My hands are tingling, my heart bouncing around like it's on a trampoline. The doors to the ambulance are open, but no one's in the back. What's happening? Who is it? I frantically ask no one in particular. Mrs. Charco, replies no one in particular. What a great feeling it is to have blind terror taken away with just 2 words. If my parents were injured or dead, I would know how to act. Grief is such a bummer because it makes you look so uncool. 2 paramedics appear from the Charcos carrying Mrs. Charco on a stretcher. Mr. Charco walks beside her like a somnambulist. Ken Sorensen, who's standing near me, applauds as the stretcher approaches the small crowd near the ambulance. Old habits die hard for footballers. The moment they see anyone on a stretcher, they give them a round of applause and say, "Well played, mate." I know he means well, but it isn't appropriate. Shortly after the main players exit the house, my mother emerges from inside carrying a bag. Presumably, she's packed some things for Mrs. Charco to take to the hospital, unless, of course, she's robbing them, but that'd be out of character. What happened? I ask no one in particular. Don't know, replies no one in particular. From the corner of my eye, while all the commotion around the ambulance is at its zenith, I catch sight of 2 familiar faces leaving the Gumleys in an expensive car. There's so much going on it doesn't grab my full attention, but one of the men is definitely Alan Brand. I think the other is the Lord Mayor. I know it's Alan because his image is still etched in my mind from this morning, and it's well documented that the Lord Mayor's head is tiny in relation to the rest of his body. I must admit, I don't see enough of him to say categorically it's the Lord Mayor, but the person with Alan Brand certainly has a tiny head. The only other person who takes notice of this event is Mr. Price. We catch each other looking at the car as it drives by. I wonder what he's thinking. I know what I'm thinking. I know something that you don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Mr. Sharko hops in the back of the ambulance with his wife. The people on the street huddle close together as the van disappears up the street, siren blasting, red light saying shoo to any slow-moving cars in the way. No one says anything. We know it's the one way to leave Pleasant Avenue that no one wants to take. I've been in an ambulance before, and I dislocated my shoulder taking off my jersey at the end of a football game. It's much bumpier inside an ambulance than you think, and the stretcher is thinner than you'd expect. On the positive side, the paramedic who attended me listened to everything I said. It was the first time I'd ever held anyone's interest for over 8 kilometres. Pleasant Avenue returns to normal, and people drift back to whatever it is they do on Saturday afternoons. I chat to Auntie Coral. She's visibly distressed. Whenever an older person sees a younger person close to death, they must feel their turn is coming soon. Naturally, Mr. Price has the complete Mrs. Sharko's story. As he explains events leading up to Mrs. Sharko's misfortune, the people of Pleasant Avenue gather to listen. Our great Pleasant Avenue sage is about to speak, and we heed his call. We may call him turd and nosy, but we know he's delivered before, so we listen to what he has to say. The Melvies, the Saracens, and Coral, despite her loathing of Mr. Price, all stop to listen, as I do myself. He talks like he's got a notepad in front of him, not unlike a high-ranking policeman talking to the press. What he says is perhaps a little more florid than how the following is written, but I always find him a little cold with his facts, so I'm trying to convey this. Mrs. Sharko returns from shops feeling unwell. She sits down in her favourite chair, starts to read The Red Shoes. At 1:10 p.m, massive heart attack. Is this some kind of standard Pleasant Avenue death? How can Mr. Price be so uncaring? This is exactly what happened to Clive. He'd know how Clive died. Why would he say this in front of Coral, knowing she's already upset about Mrs. Sharko? How does he know what happened to Mrs. Sharko anyway? How would he know she's reading The Red Shoes? I don't often get angry. I usually get morose. I suppress anger and turn it into other more productive emotions like disappointment. But I suddenly feel very protective of Coral. I know a display of anger will make me look foolish, so I reduce my natural impulse to shitty. Have you got a listening device planted in their house or something? I snap. People audibly gasp. The breeze drops. Lawnmowers stop. I obviously touch a nerve with Mr. Price. You can see it in his face. Normally, this sort of attack is done behind people's backs. Sorry? Says Mr. Price, staring daggers at me. You know... what? That... I keep swallowing the words. They just won't come out. I was acting on instinct, but now my rational side is kicking in. Don't worry about it, I say. I watch him walk away from me. No doubt, Mr. Price and I are on a collision course. We're definitely heading for a showdown of some kind. 6 p.m. Mum obviously stayed with the Sharkos at the hospital. When Dad returns from work, I see panic in his eyes because he doesn't hear the sound of frying or smell anything cooking the moment he walks in the house. He's in unfamiliar territory and he doesn't look happy. I once saw Dad put a load of washing into the oven. "Don't worry, Muscles. I'll do chops with tin peas," he says. I'd rather be hungry than eat something brown with laces. But at least he's trying. As he looks anxiously through the cupboards for tin peas, I ask him, "Why do you think the Lord Mayor might be visiting the Gumleys?" He suddenly looks at me. His eyes are filled with terror. "What about we go to the club for dinner, Muscles?" he says. Is he scared to talk about the Gumleys, or is he too scared to cook a meal? 6:14 p.m. Mum arrives home just as we're leaving. When we hear the key in the front door, our shoulders visibly drop a few centimetres. But Mum appears different. Her face is taut. She looks drained. She doesn't make her way straight to the stove and start dinner as you'd expect her to. "How did you go?" says my father, obviously a little concerned that Mum isn't going straight to the stove. She never woke up. 6:24 p.m. I look across to Mr. Price's. His Venetians are frantically going up and down, sending out messages of Mrs. Sharko's demise to whoever is watching. You could imagine him even attracting HMAS Canberra with this display. "Does Niles know yet?" I ask my mother. "The police are looking for him," she replies. "Will I have to go to the funeral? You're 21 now." 7 p.m. Most of Pleasant Avenue are at the RSL, filling in the sudden loss of a resident with a salty meal, a few drinks, and a flutter in the pokies. Coral, Nev, Lexi 3 and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Melvey, the 2 kids, Craig's fiancée Shona, us, we're all in the bistro. Mr. Price is in the snack bar. The differences between the snack bar and bistro are small. There are French doors on the bistro. You order from a menu in the bistro. There are tablecloths in the bistro, and there are no single men in the bistro. Single men eat at the snack bar because the manager, a woman with bronze-coloured hair called Donna, gives them 2 pieces of pineapple on their Hawaiian steaks. The extra piece of pineapple on their ham steaks is a sign of affection, and they appreciate it. So the place is swarming with single men eating Hawaiian steaks. My father orders one from the bistro, but he only gets the 1 pineapple ring. He needs to divorce Mum to get that extra pineapple ring. The sound of cutlery, plates, poker machines, muffled announcements, for example, is deafening. I look up from my Irish stew and catch Mr. Price's eye. We're like 2 gunfighters eyeing each other off. This town ain't big enough for both of us type of stuff. Without breaking my stare, I ask my parents why Mr. Price and Coral don't like each other. My father glances at my mother with a "should we tell him what we know" type of look. "They like each other," says my mother. I guess it's not that easy to tell the truth. 10 p.m. I stare at the Gumleys' place. I didn't think I could stare any harder. Every piece seems to fit. The plane is in the dam. The mustard gas is ready for release. It's weird to think all this is happening next door to me. 12 midnight. I target Mrs. Sharko's funeral for the release of my secret into the wild. Everyone will be there. Information will get around quickly. I'll be able to watch it spread like a firebug who lingers to watch his handiwork. I won't tell them everything, just enough to make people want more. A controlled burning, so to speak.